All right, welcome everybody to our week 7 lecture presentation. Now you guys are getting ready to turn in the compare and contrast essays this week, so I thought it would be good to go over cohesion and organization because like we pointed out in last week's presentation, the organization of your paper is very important, and we want to make sure that everything flows well together. So that's the purpose. So let's go ahead and get started. So what is cohesion? That's where we're going to go over this today. So what is cohesion? We're going to look at what strategies we can use to build cohesion between sentences and also how to organize paragraphs in the entire essay. And then we're also going to look at how genre influences organization, which genre would be the type of essay that you're going to look at. So what is cohesion? Cohesion refers to overall connectedness between sentences in a written work. So how do they fit together? Cohesion can also refer to paragraphs where each sentence is related to the next and the separate sentences work together to make a unified point. So how do they work together all in one paragraph? And it is important to notice that cohesive sentences and paragraphs will appear to work together, moving from one clear point of view to the next. So they'll have one particular goal. A lot of this has to do with having that clear, strong thesis statement. So you need to have that overall main idea clearly presented so that all of your paragraphs can work to prove that main point of view, and then all of your sentences within the paragraphs can work to prove the point of view. So sentences and paragraphs that are not cohesive seem disjointed and often leave the reader confused. And of course, we don't want our readers to be confused. So here is a paragraph example, and it lacks cohesion, so let's take a look. Captain James Cook discovered the island of Hawaii in 1779. Mauna Kea on Hawaii is the tallest mountain in the Pacific. Cook might have noticed that many mountains on the island as he sailed into Kalakaua Bay. I'm sorry, I'm horrible at Hawaiian names. The island also has 5 major volcanoes. Mauna Loa, another mountain on the island, is a dormant volcano that last erupted in 1984. Kalaʻau is the most active volcano on Earth. It continues to enlarge the land that makes up this largest island in the Hawaiian chain. The volcano sends forth lava continuously. So this is from our Longman Writer companion book, which you don't have, but I do. So, so this is a paragraph that obviously lacks cohesion. It doesn't have a clear purpose, and it doesn't all work together. We have lots of sentences that are kind of working together. So we have things about mountains and volcanoes, but then we also have this random like James Cook information and information about 1779, but then also 1984. So you see lots of things going on in this paragraph. It doesn't really work together, so we can kind of come away from it with the confusion outside of the confusion on how to say the names. So, but yeah, the information isn't really working together. So things that you can think about in terms of cohesion, in terms of this particular paragraph lacking cohesion. So what makes the first paragraph awkward or bumpy? So we look at that paragraph. What is making it awkward? So it could be that skip from the James Cook information into major volcanoes and mountains. We also see things like transitional words, transitional elements that don't quite connect things. So we can use transitional words and phrases to connect our sentences together, but sometimes if it's not done so correctly, then we have that weird, like, how does it, what? So you can look at those types of things. So what makes the next paragraph we're looking at, what makes it cohesive? And do you notice any words that signal to the reader and allow he or she to follow along? So this is our cohesive paragraph, so take a look at it. In 1779, Captain James Cook sailed into this bay and discovered the island of Hawaii. As he entered the bay, did Cook notice many of the mountains on the island? Perhaps he noticed Mauna Kea, the tallest mountain in the Pacific. Perhaps he spotted one or more of the 5 major volcanoes. One of these, Mauna Loa, is a dormant volcano that last erupted in 1984. Another, Kalau, is the most active volcano on Earth. It sends forth lava continuously. In addition, it keeps adding to the landmass of what is already the largest island in the Hawaiian chain. So there's a difference here. So we have this lack of cohesion paragraph that kind of skips around to different things, but the second paragraph actually utilizes that information to move it forward clearly. So we have that same information, but it works together. So we have the information about James Cook and how he discovered the island and what did he notice while he was there. He noticed these things. He noticed these things. So it transitions smoothly into this idea of the different mountains and volcanoes on the islands that Captain Cook noticed while he was discovering the islands. Of course, discovering in terms of a European discovering the island, right? First European to discover the island. But you can notice that it works together toward one specific goal. So what strategy can we use to build cohesion between sentences? We see those two different paragraphs, how they are different, how they obviously show one paragraph that's bumpy, that's inconsistent, and then one that works together. So it's important to know the reader's expectation and to meet those expectations, to use the no new contract. We're going to look at that, and to understand the road signs of writing. So let's move forward with those things. Reader expectations. One of the things that I've tried to stress this semester is that writing is ultimately a conversation. It's ultimately a communication between the writer and whomever the audience is. So it's important to keep the audience in mind when we work toward presenting any of our essays. So having the audience in mind and what they expect and how to follow through with those expectations is very important. So here's an example. This is a paragraph that has no concern for the reader. When looking at his work, a critic must be aware of the limitations of the period in which the author lived, a time when the social restrictions of women must have obviously played a role in his view of that gender. Nonetheless, we know that he was not one to conform to social norms, nor was he an avid moralist. The broadness of his work and the lack of preachy material leaves much of his personal sentiments in a veil of mystery. A critic must be aware of the complexity of his material, but give leniency according to his era. Carolyn Ruth Swift Lenz, Gail Green, and Carol Thomas Neely accurately admonished feminist critics to view the writer with some restraint. When analyzing Helena in All's Well That Ends Well, her great strength of character can be accurately seen as a liberated portrayal of a female character, though she does subject herself in traditional female stations. So this particular paragraph has a lot of great information. Talks about different literary critiques and how this particular character in All's Well That Ends Well is very strong, feminist type of role. But what we don't know is who is this writer. Unless you know the work All's Well That Ends Well that we see at the end of the paragraph, we have no idea as readers who the heck this paragraph is talking about. So it's important that the reader get to know what you are doing. So the purpose and the point of view you are taking needs to be clear from the beginning. Don't try to have that veil of mystery in your writing. We're not writing mystery novels here. We're making sure that our audience is on the same page we are. So let's look at this in a different way. So this is one that has a paragraph that does consider the audience. So when looking at the writings of William Shakespeare, a critic must be aware of the limitations of the period in which the author lived, a time when the social restrictions of women must have obviously played a role in his view of that gender. Nonetheless, William Shakespeare was not one to conform to societal norms, nor was he an avid moralist. The broadness of his work and the lack of preachy material leaves much of his personal sentiments in a veil of mystery. A critic must be aware of the complexity of his material, but give leniency according to his era. Carol Ruth Swift Lenz, Gail Green, and Carol Thomas Neely accurately admonished feminist critics to view Shakespeare with some restraint, saying, quote, "Feminist critics of Shakespeare must use the strategies and insights of this new criticism selectively, for they examine a male dramatist of extraordinary range, writing in a remote period when women's positions were in obviously ways more restricted and less disputed than our own. With the citation. Therefore, when analyzing Helena in All's Well That Ends Well, her great strength of character can be accurately seen as a liberated portrayal of a feminine character, though she does subject herself to traditional female stations. So here we have the same information that's presented in the last paragraph, but we're not left wondering who the heck they're talking about. We actually have a clear understanding who that is, William Shakespeare. And it is clear from the very beginning of the paragraph, we have a clear understanding. So understanding the audience and considering the audience's background knowledge and really knowledge of your topic is going to be important when you're creating that cohesive look to your paper. Another strategy for creating cohesion is the known new contract. So basically in this type of organization, you're going to present something that the audience would know and then something that is new, so that way you build upon the audience's background knowledge and then share new information. So let's watch this particular paragraph and how it develops. Portland, 60 miles from the Pacific Ocean, is by no means immune to the suburbanization that has sapped the vitality from many cities. Its suburbs now contain about 2/3 of the area's 1.4 million residents and about half of the area's jobs. Yet, as the suburbs have grown, the downtown has become more attractive and popular than ever. Downtown Portland has distinct edges. Its eastern border is the deep navigable Willamette River, lined for more than a mile by Tom McCall Waterfront Park, a grassy, mostly level expanse suited to events that draw thousands, such as the Rose Festival, a blues festival, and a summer symphony series. Its western border is the steep West Hills, which contain Washington Park, home of the International Rose Fest Gardens, where more than 400 varieties of roses are cultivated, and Forest Park, whose 4,800 acres of Douglas fir, alder, and maple constitute one of the largest national preserves and hiking areas in any American city. So each of the sentences in that paragraph started with things that people would know, followed by new information. So a topic and then a detail. So we know what Portland is, and we know that it's by the Pacific Ocean. Yes, that's something that we know. And then it adds more information that that it's not immune to the suburbanization that has sapped the vitality from many cities. So we present something that, okay, the audience has a clear understanding of. Okay, downtown Portland. We know that there's a downtown Portland. Let's give some information that we might not know, which would be some details about what it's like for those of us that have never been there. So it keeps giving us that back and forth kind of idea of here's some information you do know, and here's some information that you might not know. So the known information is often in the subject of the sentence, and the new information follows in the predicate of the sentence. So that's the stuff after the verb, right? So its western border is the steep West Hills, which contain Washington Park, home of the International Rose Fest Gardens, where more than 400 varieties of roses are cultivated, and Forest Park, whose 4,800 acres of Douglas fir, alder, and maple constitute one of the largest national preserves and hiking areas in any American city. So even if you did, some of us may have never been to Portland, so this all might be new information, but we can look on a map and be able to see, okay, this is where certain things are, but it gives more information. So it talks about Washington Park, which is something that you could go on a map and find, but then it gives us new information about the Rose Fest Gardens and about Forest Park and things that we might not know, that this is the largest national preserve and hiking areas in any American city. So those are things that we might not know. So we know that every kind of writing is going to flow in some way. However, it's a very normal construction. We can view it as a contract. So this is something that the reader can develop an expectation for when you have, okay, they're going to present something I know, they're going to share something new. So if you have that same pattern over and over again, then the reader is going to create that expectation, so you could think of it as a contract. Of course, I'm not saying you have to do this over and over again in your paper, but it's just one way to create cohesion. Maybe in one particular paragraph you start building on information that the reader knows and then that the reader might not know. Other things to look at when you're trying to develop cohesion are the road signs of writing. So these are signals that are meant to help the reader understand the writer's message. It's discourse about discourse, so signals that communicate about communication. You could think of these as road signs that clarify the purpose or direction of a passage, so you know which way things are going to go based on these road signs. For example, is an example of such a road sign is this little phrase, for example, lets us know that something that's coming next is an example of a previous idea that was presented. So the reader expects the writer to offer an example of a previously discussed concept. So here are some examples of road signs. That would be your transition. These are transitional words and phrases. For example, first, in the first place, finally, on one hand, on the other hand, not only, but also, moreover, furthermore, likewise, also. I actually, it's funny, you could look at this list and I'll continue reading, but my daughter, who is in 4th grade, is they're starting to write persuasive papers, and she wrote a paper about gum and allowing kids to chew gum in school, and she had all these great benefits of gum, which I hate gum, by the way. Ugh, I hate gum. It's so gross. But she had some good points, and it was interesting to read. But at one point, she used the transition word, however, which indicates kind of an idea that you're going to give an opposite viewpoint or a negative of what you had previously stated. And she used this word, and the information that came next was still along the same lines as what she had stated before. So she was still giving those positive ideas about gum, but she used the word however, and it made you think something else. So I was trying to tell her about it, and she goes, well, my teacher said I could use that word. Like, yes, you can use the word, but the intention behind it is different. So it's a little harder to explain to a 4th grader that probably need to use different transition words depending on the situation. But I talked to her about expectations. So, when I read the word however, I expected you to give me something that would be bad about gum. And she's like, no, that's not what the paper's about. That's true. So instead, let's use a transition word that gives us an idea that you're going to give me more information about how cool gum is. So we use words like moreover, furthermore, in addition to. So talked about those types of transition words, and she changed it. But sometimes you get a little kickback, like my teacher knows better than you. But anyway, it's important to be able to choose these transition words that work with the context of your sentences. So using words like however instead of on the contrary, on the other hand, are going to give an opposite or negative view of what you've already said. So try to make sure that the context fits with the transition. Things like therefore, so, consequently, as a result. That's like you're taking all the different parts and adding them together to come up with a conclusion. So that's what those types of words are going to go to. Nevertheless, yet, still, at any rate, after all, of course. So this, like, contrary to what all these things say, I'm going to give you an idea. So that's also along the lines of the however. Namely, for example, for instance, that is, in other words. So all of those would lead into examples that are going to come up next. And then thus, then, and in conclusion. Those are all bringing it to a head, like bringing it to a conclusion. Just a little tip before we move on to the next slide. When you're writing an essay, I think that since, probably 4th grade or a little later, you're taught these transition words and how to use them and that kind of stuff. And you see this phrase in conclusion in the last paragraph of almost every student essay from 4th grade to probably now where you're at. And what happens when things are used over and over and over again is they actually become very cliche. So as you move into college writing, the words in conclusion seem to be overused. And so anytime we overuse something, it becomes boring. We don't want to bore our readers. And I actually suggest that you try to stay away from the phrase in conclusion. We don't want to bore. So let your conclusion come to fruition. Let the reader see that your points are strongly made, that you're summarizing the main ideas, that you're bringing everything together. Try to avoid this particular phrase in the last paragraph of your essay because it actually kind of devalues the essay in a little bit of a way. So just a little tip as you're moving into college writing, trying to avoid cliches. So then how do we organize paragraphs and entire essays to have a cohesive idea? So it's still the same guiding principle. We want each element to build upon each other and to prove one main idea. So each sentence in a paragraph is working to build upon each other and to prove the main idea of that paragraph. Same thing happens in an essay. So you're working with each paragraph to prove the thesis statement. So remember from a previous discussion, the thesis statement is a 1 to 2 sentence statement at the end of your introductory paragraph that states the main idea of your entire essay, including the point of view that you have concerning that main idea and how you're going to how you are going to actually go on and prove that point of view. I like to call it the topic stance how progression. So the thesis statement has your topic, whatever it may be. It has your stance, which is your point of view, the actual argument that you are making, and then how are you going to prove it? So how are you going to structure your essay? How are you going to build upon these concepts? So if I were going to build a compare and contrast thesis statement based on literature, I might have used this particular example before, but it still is a good example, so we'll go ahead and do it. So the topic of my compare and contrast is comparing Charles Dickens' work Hard Times and Charlotte Bronte's work Jane Eyre. So we're comparing those two things. So the stance would be that they are similar. So we have that similar idea within comparisons. So they address several of the same issues in their novels. And then how am I going to prove that point of view? Well, the similar issues are divorce, social class structure, and biblical or religious themes. So those are all things that you could find in both of these works. So if I'm comparing the two works, my thesis statement could be Charles Dickens and Charlotte Bronte address several of the same issues in their novels, Hard Times and Jane Eyre. Not only do these two authors confront issues such as divorce and social class structure, but they share themes such as biblical or religious references. So you can see that there's a clear understanding that there is a comparison going on, and we have our kind of point by point where we can go through the rest of the essay and go, okay, now I'm going to have a section about divorce. I'll have a section about social class structure, have a section about biblical or religious references, and all of those things in the body of your essay are going to work toward proving that particular statement. So the paragraphs are cohesive because they're working toward the same idea. So this is just a quick outline to show how that might work. This is, you might think about, is it a point-by-point construction? Or what kind of construction is? Think about last week's presentation. Anyway, so I'll let you think about that. And perhaps you could write your answer in the discussion board this week. What kind of construction is this? So you have the first section of the body of the essay is divorce, and how does divorce relate to Dickens' work? How does it relate to Bronte's? Then social class structure, how does it relate to Dickens? How does it relate to Bronte? Themes of biblical and religious references, how does it relate to Dickens? How does it relate to Bronte? And that would be how you connect each of the body paragraphs into that thesis statement. So let's talk about, let's do a little practice. Okay, so we have lots of sentences here at the bottom of the screen. So every sentence and paragraph in your essay should directly or indirectly relate to your thesis statement. So they're all working toward proving that thesis statement. Just the sentences themselves, the paragraphs as a whole, all working to prove that thesis statement. That's how you build cohesion in a paper. And the way in which you craft your thesis statement should signal to the reader how your essay will proceed. So if you looked back at that thesis statement I created before, it clearly states divorce, then social class structure, then biblical or religious references. So the body of my essay follows that same pattern. So I have several sentences written here and that could make up a paragraph. And we're going to look for the topic sentence and which sentences belong in the paragraph and which ones do not belong in the paragraph. So What we're going to do, I'm going to read the sentences out loud, then you can pause the presentation and try to put a paragraph together yourself. Feel free to remove sentences if you don't think that they'll fit, and then I'll share with you after this slide my paragraph that I've put together. But first, I want you to think about which one is the topic sentence. Remember, paragraphs are like mini essays. They'll have like that thesis statement element, but it's going to be in the form of a topic sentence. It's going to have supporting details, just like the whole essay has supporting details. It has an introduction, a conclusion. So paragraphs kind of are like mini little essays. So let's look at these sentences, and then I suggest that you pause the video and then move forward to look at my paragraph. So here are the sentences. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was born in 1756 in Salzburg, Austria. His most notable works are his operas, symphonies, quartets, and piano concertos. Mozart's accomplishments in music seem remarkable even today. He began composing music at the age of 5. He lived most of his life in Salzburg and Vienna. Mozart and his wife were both poor managers of money. He published numerous compositions before reaching adolescence. He died at the age of 35. His first concert tour of Europe was at the age of 6. He married in 1782. On his first tour, he played harpsichord, organ, and violin. They were plagued by debts. And Mozart composed over 600 musical compositions. So try to think about which sentences would belong in a paragraph together and what would be the topic sentence of that paragraph. So pause the video and then we'll look at that paragraph. All right, so hopefully you paused and worked on those sentences on your own. And this is the paragraph that I came up with. So here we go. So Mozart's accomplishments in music seem remarkable even today. That's my topic sentence. At the age of 6, he made his first concert tour of Europe playing harpsichord, organ, and violin. He had begun composing music at the age of 5, and by adolescence, he had published numerous musical compositions. When he died at 35, his works included over 600 compositions, most notably operas, symphonies, quartets, and piano concertos. Okay, so I actually combined some sentences and made those fit together a little nicer, but you can see that the topic sentence is about his music accomplishments, and every other sentence also is about the music accomplishments. I totally left out all the information about his wife and being poor money managers and any of the biographical information that didn't really fit in the overall scheme of the paragraph. I only used information that would fit with this topic. So you might have a different paragraph, but what you're looking for is that you have a clear topic sentence, and each sentence in the paragraph is working to prove that topic rather than just give random biographical information. So there are methods of organization in academic essays. We have gone through a few of those, and these are just some examples of different types of organization, and the way that you present your material will depend on the genre of writing that you are doing. So we have sequence writing. This is often called process analysis. This is when you use narrative or descriptive writing characterized by explicit time markers. So it's actually following a sequence of events. If you're doing a process analysis, it's a little bit more nonfiction in terms of it's going to give you a process or steps on how to accomplish something. Logical order is a common in persuasive or argument discourse. So one sentence is a proposition and the next is the conclusion or the result. Amplification, where one sentence clarifies an earlier one by defining, qualifying, or illustrating it. So this is where we have a point that's made, a word that's used, and then we define that particular word to give more meaning. Accumulation is where one sentence introduces an idea or an example similar to that of preceding sentence in often introduced by transitional words such as likewise, also, moreover. So we're building upon things. Other methods of organization, contrast. This is where one sentence contrasts with the other. So it's showing opposites or things that are different. Each of these are broken up into sentence type of organization, so this is sentence by sentence rather than an entire essay. But you can see that there are definitely ways to expand these ideas into entire essays. Let's see, repetition. This is where two or more sentences are linked by a repetition of key words. I oftentimes tell students to avoid repeating things, and that's the reason why you would do that is that you don't want to sound boring. But you can use repetition to emphasize a point. So if you're using the same word in 3 sentences consecutively, sometimes that can really add emphasis rather than sound boring. So it's really about how you intend to use it and the effectiveness of what you create. Parallelism is a duplication of sentence structures, and that has the same idea where you're adding emphasis based on the sentence structure being the same rather than I only use one kind of sentence structure because I can't think of the way to write other varieties. So it actually has a point of doing it. Comparison is where you compare ideas of one sentence with that of another, where they show how things are the same. Definition, which is explaining a sentence or topic or idea by beginning with general information and moving towards specifics. Cause and effect, so that explains the causes of a phenomenon and then identify the effects of those. And problem solution, where you identify a problem and propose solutions to those problems relying on logic. Okay, so there are lots of other sources available to look at organization. I have some links up here on the board, so you're welcome to take a look at those. And of course, this week we are working toward turning in that compare and contrast essay. But all of these modes of organization can help you with sentence structure and paragraph structure in any type of essay. So hopefully this is helpful to you, and we will see you in the discussion board. Thanks for your participation. We'll see you later.